It's The Spillover with Alex Clark. A few days ago, Ben Shapiro's sister, classically Abby, tweeted, "I don't relate to breakup songs. Here's why. When you're dating for marriage and you both go in knowing what you're looking for, you'll realize rather quickly whether or not it will work out, and often before you get attached. Date frivolously, you'll relate to breakup songs." I posted this to the Politics Instagram, which is the Instagram for both The Spillover and my daily show, Politics, and conservatives seem to vehemently disagree with her. And I was a little shocked by that because I thought maybe a lot more people would agree. And here's the conservatee, as I like to say. I disagreed too. In fact, I was really bothered by it, and I even texted my best friend Lauren to get her thoughts. And she is my wonderfully, unapologetically honest friend. So she responded, she was like, "Well, does it bother you because it hits close to home and you feel called out?" I said, "No, not at all. It bothers me because I feel like it lacks empathy, it's unfair, and also ignorant. You can be doing absolutely everything you can to date to marry, and if a guy pulls the rug out from under you, then yeah, you're going to relate to a breakup song. I mean, I could do a 5-hour podcast on all my insane dating stories, trust me. And yes, I do wonder if marriage is something that I want so badly, and that's why it hasn't happened for me. You know, I'm wishing too much for it. I'm praying too much. Some of us, I know, feel that way about having a baby. You're married and you want it so bad, and yet the pregnancy test keeps coming up negative. I feel like such a freak sometimes because I get really emotional lately when other people get engaged or married. I feel like I'm drowning in jealousy, which isn't healthy, I know. Pray for me. But there's always some sort of milestone that we're trying to reach in life that someone else has, right? You want a job promotion so that you can buy the house. You buy the house so that you can get married. You get married, but then you really want to have kids. You have the kids, and then you want to be able to afford to stop working. You retire, and then you wish that you had more money to afford to go on vacation, and so on and so on and so on. Everyone is working towards something. You never feel like anything is enough, whether that's getting a certain amount of likes on a picture on Instagram or getting a boyfriend. And maybe I sound like a liberal, sensitive baby, but Abby's tweet deeply hurt my feelings because the topic is so sensitive to me. And don't get it twisted. I follow her and I've never disagreed with her on anything else. It's just one thing. But I wanted to know if I was alone in this or not. So today I have two guests, conservative commentators and TPUSA contributors Morgan Zegers and Isabel Brown. This is When You're Dating to Marry, but It Doesn't End in Marriage on The Spillover. Morgan Zegers, what was your reaction to classically Abby saying that if you are truly dating for marriage, then you won't relate to breakup songs?
Oof. I think I was like you. It hurt deep down in the bones. And it's not that I'm a wimp or a wussy or, I date frivolously. I don't. But sometimes when you're dating intentionally, it still ends in heartbreak. It's still, people change, their desires in life change, their outlook on what they want in life changes. And other times just traumatic things happen and it changes people. And that leads to things like relationships ending or people changing what they want out of that relationship. And just life is kind of crazy sometimes. And so you can be a good conservative girl and you can do the intentional dating and have these values and be so grounded and try and be a Proverbs 31 woman like I'm always trying to be. And you can want to be a Ruth to someone and they could still not want that with you. And hence the breakup song. And I relate to them very much. That being said, my take, and I have commented this on the original post that you put on Politics, was the fact that there's so many songs about getting revenge, like before he cheats, or like the Carrie Underwood songs about smashing people's tires and throwing their stuff out the window, all this stuff. I don't think that's healthy either. I think those songs that encourage toxicity to continue, that encourage us to hate our exes and hope that they never have happiness again and that their next person cheats on them to get back at them. What are we doing with that? There's a better way to go through a breakup. You can wish them well, and everybody's just trying to meet their person. That's what I tell myself. Everybody's just trying to meet their person. And so I hope everybody can consider that moving forward. There's an opportunity for us to end negativity with the breakup and just move on.
Isabel, are Morgan and I being way too sensitive about this?
No, absolutely not. And I think, Morgan, you hit a really important point there, that you can want all of the right things out of a relationship, and you can get into a relationship with the full intention to marry. But maybe even though the other person says that up front, they might change their mind later on, or they might have circumstances affect their life that fundamentally transforms who they are as a person. And that's not always a bad thing. I think we have this misconception in conservative circles, especially with dating, that if both people say up front, yeah, like this is what I'm looking for, I want to get married, we have very similar values, maybe we have the same faith, and it all looks perfect on paper, that it just automatically should work out for that reason. But the truth is, sometimes a year in, 2 years in, 3 years into a relationship, things change and life is really difficult. Circumstances can absolutely change the nature of a relationship. And even though you might both want those things, you realize that's not the person you want those things with. And so I find it really interesting. Abby's tweet is talking about, well, if both people say that up front, that should be the way it is. And sometimes it does work out for people that way, and they're very lucky and they win the lottery. And for other people, it's not. You do have to go through that process of figuring out, this is the rest of my life that I'm talking about. And that this other person is talking about too. And if it's not the right person, it's not the right person. The other thing is, not all breakup songs are tragic and sad. Some of them are, wow, I'm really finding out who I am in this process, or I'm figuring out what I want out of something, and that wasn't the right person. So to say you universally can't relate to any breakup song seems a little ignorant to me.
Well, here's the other thing too, and you brought up, you could tell each other at the get-go, hey, I am dating with the intention to marry, and then one or both of you changes your mind.
Or the other person lies, which I think we're discounting the reality that could happen.
This is the reality that I have had happen to me. Every single serious relationship that I have had, besides one, I would say in the last 6 or 7 years, I have said on the first date, hey, I am dating to marry. I'm taking this seriously. I don't want to date just real, whatever the word is. I'm not dating casually. I'm taking this seriously. Here's all the things that I want. Here's what I'm looking for. I don't want to date, for example, longer than 2 years without seriously talking about engagement. Whatever. I've always been honest about this. And all these guys have always said, I'm with you. I totally agree. I want the same thing. We're on the same page. I also want to be engaged within 2 years. I'm like, perfect. Great. And then every single one of them, 5-6 months in, it's like clockwork. They're like, wow, this is getting way too serious. This isn't what I signed up for. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about?
Or I said that at the time, but I don't know what I want. Like, I don't know what I want out of this relationship or my life. And like, I just need more time to figure that out. I just don't know. I don't know. And then they kind of backtrack and waffle out of that.
And I'm like, what do you mean? I followed your lead. I was honest with you. As women, guys always complain that they can't read our minds. Well, how do I know what you're wanting? And I'm like, I tell you up front, this is what I'm wanting. So how can you say 5, 6, 7 months in, well, this is really catching me by surprise. I didn't know that you were really dating with the intention to marry.
Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting too. A lot of young girls will talk to me and say, I can't believe you talk on social media and stuff so much about how you can't wait to get married one day and have babies. Don't you think that scares boys away? And I'm like, yeah, I hope it scares them away. I hope they do not bother me. Like, if you don't want a homestead, if you don't want to get land, if you don't believe in like raising animals, and what I think family is a legacy of values. I think when you marry someone, it's not just paperwork. You're saying, I want to build a legacy of values, not of like reputation and wealth and anything, but I want to live life with them, and I want to build something with them for the rest of my life. And I always imagine myself as like a little grandma with all these little grandkids. That's what I think of.
That's so Morgan. I love that.
And so I think that. And I listen to these young girls and they say, oh no, I don't want to freak them out. I don't want to bring it up on the first dates. And I'm like, no. Okay, well, then you're going to run into situations where a couple months in, you start talking about your values. They start going, what the heck? And you realize, wait, we didn't even have common ground to stand on in the beginning. So don't hide yourself. I love, honestly, weeding out the ones that will never be interested. My problem now is, though, you guys, now that I talk so openly about what I want, I have liars. I have people saying they want to churn butter, they want to make some jam, they want to get some cows and baby goats. None of them are serious because now they're on to me that I want a homesteading man. And so that's kind of the fun thing of it. But just be super upfront and be yourself. And then you do avoid the problems that Abby's probably talking about of being frivolous and not intentional in that way. But just because you say, I'm going to date intentional and I'm going to be upfront about what I want, it does not in any way mean that you are going to meet somebody who's not going to lie to you, who's going to want those same things. And it doesn't exactly mean you're then on this fast track to marriage and to building a life with someone. It's just so much messier than that. Life is messy, love is messy, and that's okay. It's just about riding the ups and downs.
Isabel, I'll start with you and then I'll go to Morgan. Do you feel like when you look back on your last serious relationship that you were truly dating with marriage as the main intent?
I was, yeah. And I was in a bit of a unique situation where I started dating someone when I was, brand new 21 years old-ish. And dated them through my early 20s. And it was really serious and did long distance and did all of that. And I loved that person so sincerely. And I know that they loved me very sincerely as well. But external circumstances of life just really changed both of us and like who the person was at the end of the day. And so even though we were both still trying to work towards that goal, it was just really apparent that we weren't the same people by the time our relationship ended than we were when we started out. And that was okay. I think it's a really hard thing to come to a realization like that, but it's also really mature to realize, you can't keep trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. That's not how relationships are supposed to work. And at the end of the day, it really shouldn't be that hard. And if you truly love somebody and you want to see them be successful and be in love for the rest of their life and embrace all of the things that we're talking about, building a legacy with somebody and raising a family with somebody, you should want it to be for the person that God designed them for, not you trying to take advantage of that and being selfish of holding on to the things that you've had, even if it's been a long time. So I think there's a lot to be said about this idea that people change, and that's okay. It's a beautiful thing because we weren't always intended to be the same people that we were at one particular spot in our life. But when you have those deep, deep down feelings, even if you didn't have them for the first part of your relationship, that, I don't think this is what I was intended to do from God, don't ignore those things. Don't push them down. Know that that's okay to let that go and start pursuing what you were planned for.
Morgan, what about you? Do you feel like when you look back on your last serious relationship, you were truly pursuing them with the idea of marriage in mind?
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys, I think, Alex, you touched on this, like when you first enter a relationship, you get called wifey and there's all these little nicknames and you dream and stuff and you talk about things and
everything's rose-colored glasses at the beginning.
And so I think a lot of conservative girls, we hear these things and we're like, oh, they want the same things I want. Like they also believe in these concepts. And that just, for them, it was like an initial thing of like everything's exciting and in the new phases of a relationship. But then us, we believe in it deep down to its core. And that's just kind of how it was. I think what you said, putting a square into a circle is not ever going to work.
Yeah.
External factors change people. That's what happened to me in my situation. And but when you have deep love for someone, even if it feels wrong, I don't know if you guys have had this in life, but like I've had a few instances where I've been sitting and all of the factors around me, I just feel it's wrong. I know, I'm like, this is not my future. This is not me.
What were some of the things that were causing you to think that?
Just in the sense of like drifting further and further away than from what my vision of life was of having babies one day and having my own home and being the homemaker, being the homeschool mom, being the maternal figure and being the wife, being a grandmother one day. And so I'm very intentional, not just with dating, but with living. And so like I have visions for myself, that not that I have to like reach certain goals, but just like an idea of what Morgan at 40 looks like, 50, 60. And in the last relationship, we were going back and forth, talking, like literally debating the concept of marriage at that point. When you have to debate someone,
what does that mean? Debating? What does that mean? Debating the concept
of
marriage?
Is it paperwork or is it commitment or what does it mean? What is marriage? What is the purpose if half the people get divorced? Nobody loves each other after a few decades. You lose feelings. It was just like arguing the concept.
If that was right for you. I also want to say before we really get too far into this conversation and talking about our past relationships, Morgan, you said a word that is so important, I think, when it comes to understanding the lens that we're coming from, and that's intention. We're very intentional. And another word that's important for this conversation is authentic. We're very authentic in our relationships with what we want up front, what we're looking for out of a relationship. And I think both of those things are so far removed from modern dating culture at all today in 2021 that the fact that we're even having this conversation as three women in their 20s looking for an intentional, authentic relationship marching towards marriage is really rare. And so you might be listening to this podcast and you might not necessarily relate to what we're saying. You might not have personal experiences that are similar to ours, but my hope is that the conversation we're having today and all of these conversations we can have moving forward, talking about dating from a conservative perspective and a Christian perspective, will allow for more intention and authenticity moving forward, because that's really where we need to go as a society if we're serious about preserving the idea of a healthy relationship.
Well, I like what you were bringing up, Morgan, about what is marriage? Is it a piece of paper? Is it a partnership? So what was the conclusion that you came to? And then what was the conclusion that your boyfriend at the time came to, that you all had disagreed?
Yeah, and I look back, this was over months. I mean, because we had a great love and a closeness, a friendship, best friends, like allies. That's what I really want. But that kind of disintegrated over time as we really started to disagree on the fundamentals. And so when we were debating, as we're debating, and he's becoming more firm in his position, that it's just paperwork, I'm becoming more firm in my position. My belief that this is the building of a legacy. I want someone to look at me one day and say, I want to build a life with that person. I want to build a family. I want her to be the mother of my kids. Like, I want to impregnate her. Like that, I hope that my person feels that way. And so as we're disagreeing, I'm becoming more firm. And also, I mean, we're doing this podcast right now. I feel super uncomfortable. I never talk about relationships publicly. I have very few female friends. I've opened up to you guys. Like, that's as much as I've opened up. Like,
Really?
when I don't talk to many people, and I don't open up about personal relationships. I don't think it's good to go public with this kind of stuff. I usually am never public in relationships, but I was in this recent one, which was a mistake, I think. But doing this podcast, I'm trying to help the young girls that are listening. Otherwise, I wouldn't talk about it. And part of my problem is in the relationship, I was always so quiet, and I was going through this privately, and I wasn't going to my mentors. And towards the end of the relationship, I started doing that. And I started reaching out. I reached out to Isabel. I started talking to you too. And just like talking with my close friends and talking to my female mentors that are decades older. And I started to kind of like tell them the basics. And they were like, Morgan, you've been doing what?
Yeah,
and that alone for me was crazy. And just to kind of wrap up that disagreement that we had, first of all, one of our last conversations was me saying like, what you want will have me being a 40, 50-year-old woman that's childless and non-married. And I think I'm going to be depressed and sad with that lifestyle. And I can't imagine myself doing it. Even at 60, 70, I think I'm going to be a depressed person.
What was he wanting? Just to have like a partnership, you live together or whatever, but you're not technically married?
Yeah, no marriage, no kids. And
which was stupid.
And I said to myself, I can't do it.
That's not what you were told up front either.
Yeah, and I said I can't do it. And what he said, and this is what really sticks with me, is why do you think like that? Why do you see yourself? You're 24. Why do you see yourself as a 60-year-old and think like that? And my answer was just exactly. And this is a little TMI, but he left and he's in a great, happy relationship, and I'm happy for him. But to me, he always told me it was just paperwork. It's the classic thing that guys say, that marriage is pointless. It's just paperwork, all this stuff. And then after, I was like, what happened to never leaving? And his response was, I never committed to anything I couldn't walk away from.
Wow.
So to all the women out there that think it is just paperwork, and when a guy says he'll never leave, but he won't sign things or he won't actually make that commitment, and he thinks it's just a title, that's what you're going to get told after they're gone. Think about that.
So that's what I was wondering is the excuse that guys give you as to why they aren't ready for marriage. So the excuse you got was, well, it's just paperwork and I don't need to sign anything.
We lived together, we had a life together. What's the difference? What difference would it make?
And so what was the excuse that you got, Isabel?
I mean, I will say I love love. I am very traditional in that sense that I've always seen myself growing up and getting married and having a big family and being a mom. And that's been something I've wanted ever since I was a little girl. And I am a very emotionally driven, passionate person. And I just have so much love, I think, to give to people that I'm very intentional about that in friendships and relationships and my relationships with my family. And so off and on, I've had pretty serious boyfriends since I was 16, with spells of being single in between all of that. But I would say my relationship in college, which was a few years, and then my relationship in my early 20s, that recently ended, were probably the most serious relationships that I've been in. And in both situations, it was the same conversation up front of like, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. It's really great. They became your best friend. It was great all the time. The one that I had in college for a few years was not great. It was all a lie. And that person was, serial talking to other girls, lying to your face all the time. It was just a really big problem. And at the time, I think I was just so young and so immature, and especially from a Christian perspective, was so obsessed with the idea that like unconditional love means forgiveness and overcoming some of these problems. Like, it's okay. We'll still grow up and get married. We just have to work through this trial first and figure out a way to work together and build a family even through the ashes, like coming up from the ashes. And that's what I was being told by a lot of the other Christian and Catholic people in my life, that like that was the really important thing to do. People make mistakes And even if that person cheated on you, then like, that's okay. It's horrible and it's really sad. But relationships can be solved, you know, even in spite of that. And look at all these people who are still married, even though they had those scandals in their marriage and stuff like that. So I think over time in that relationship, it just became a self-worth thing of me being like, you know, no, if you're going to get married to somebody, they at least bare minimum need to only be interested in you. And so that was the conclusion of that. But clearly that person was not emotionally mature enough to actually submit to the idea of a lifelong commitment to somebody, and they weren't ready for that. In my more recent relationship, it was actually pretty tragic because it wasn't necessarily the fault of somebody. It was literally just external circumstances that really changed that person forever, dealing with, you know, illness and death and all of that outside of our relationship. And so it was interesting because all of a sudden, pretty much like a light switch, our relationship just really fundamentally changed and it never went back to what it was before. And so I think that conversation just ended up being, you know, my life is so different now because this thing happened. And your life is really different now because this thing happened. And I think we just don't know what we want, not even out of this relationship, but like out of a career, out of what we're passionate about, even our hobbies, what we like to do every day. And we need to go take time and like figure all of that out, because you can't commit your entire life to someone and submit in an area of servant love, of agape love, if you're into Christian dating conversations, that leads itself to marriage if you can't even figure out, you know, like what makes you happy and what makes you tick at the end of the day. And so that wasn't necessarily like a, oh, I changed my mind, I don't want to marry you anymore conversation. It was a conversation of what does marriage look like? And to me, fundamentally, marriage is not just a lifelong commitment. That is a forever covenant between you and that person and a third party, and that's God. And if God is not the foundation of your relationship, from a Judeo-Christian perspective here, it's kind of doomed to fail, in my opinion. You need to understand there are circumstances beyond you. And if both people aren't willing to have the foundation of that relationship be a relationship with God, because ultimately you will fail each other, the only entity that can never fail you is God, then I don't think it can end in marriage.
I've been thinking a lot about unconditional love, and you bringing that up reminded me of kind of what I've been toying with. And I've just been thinking, is it even possible for human beings, are we even capable as mortal beings to unconditionally love someone, despite no matter how they treat you, no matter how much they wrong you, that you still love them? And I started thinking, what if the only person who can truly unconditional love is Jesus? What if, no matter if they're your spouse or not, you're really not even capable of unconditional love?
Yeah, well, there's a really good book, How to Raise a Conservative Daughter. And one of the first chapters is about understanding self-worth that comes from God, that comes from you being wonderfully individually made, versus the self-esteem that comes with how many followers you have, what the girls at school say about you, whether the boy likes you or not. And I mean, I don't have a daughter. I'm not trying to raise one right now, but I read the book and it helped me. I hope everybody out there reads it, because it was just such a good, simple lesson. And I read it post-breakup, and it was just like, I am worth something, because you feel like crap. You get left for someone else. It's like, whatever. But like when you are looking for that and you forget some of the most simple things, that like, my worth isn't determined by my relationship. And when you're more confident in yourself, this is the thing, you guys. I hope everybody out there, don't look for someone and say, wow, they're troubled, I should fix them and love them unconditionally.
Yep, that's a problem.
What I struggled with is understanding the difference between like, okay, if somebody is worthy of unconditional love, I'll love them and I'll get them through problems. But sometimes it's you ignoring red flags. It's not you being a Proverbs 31 woman. It's not you being gracious and full of grace and love and forgiveness and all the things. You're just ignoring red flags, and you're ignoring probably the lesson that you should be taking from God, that's saying this isn't your right path in life. And so I always struggled with that. And not only that, but when you start to see the red flags, my biggest problem is I see all of this suffering going on worldwide, and I'm here with my happy relationship. Maybe he doesn't want marriage. Maybe he doesn't want certain things. Maybe we disagree on some things. Am I ungrateful?
Right.
I felt ungrateful every time I challenged myself on these things, because it's like, really? I can't have it all? And so now I'm going to be a little depressed girl with a great job, great career, great boyfriend, a place to live. I should be thankful is what I kept telling myself. And so I go back and forth on that, because I never want to be ungrateful, but it put me in a situation where I was allowing behavior that I probably shouldn't have been, stuff like that, where I go back and forth.
That's not love at the end of the day. Love is encouraging someone to be the best version of themselves and pushing them to be the best version of themselves, not enabling those behaviors like red flags that you were talking about, Morgan. But I think all of this really boils down to what you said exactly, Alex, is that human beings are flawed, and we have removed God from every aspect of society, not just dating, but especially dating culture. And we talked about how dating with intention and walking towards marriage is really rare in society today. We have lied to multiple generations of people in this country and around the world that marriage is not something to value, and that having God as a part in your relationship is not important. A relationship isn't even really about feelings. It's about sex and hooking up, and it's about making yourself feel good, not giving yourself to another human being or serving someone through unconditional love. And so we've arrived at a time where men will say anything to make a girl get with them or fall in love with them or hook up with them, whatever.
It's
And
fascinating.
things are so instant that it doesn't even register with somebody that you're lying to them. You're just saying whatever it takes to get a girlfriend or to hook up with somebody. And it just blows my mind that we have now arrived at a time in society where marriage is just a piece of paper, that God doesn't need to be part of your relationship. And even dating itself is so archaic and so our parents' generation that love has been boiled down to split-second decisions about somebody's picture that's been heavily edited on a dating app, swiping one way or another, like, yes, I'd like to have sex with that person, or no, I would not. That is what love is in society in 2021. So in some ways, it's almost hard for me to blame a guy who lies to you or makes all these horrible decisions, because we've told an entire generation of men that they should never grow up and commit and settle down and promise these things to you and actually mean it, because they need to sow their wild oats and be crazy and hook up with as many girls as possible. And at the same time, we're telling women that they should not value the idea of marriage or family or commitment or someone who truly loves them. They need to be completely career obsessed and driven by their own passions and their own desires. Oh, you don't need to be in love with someone to hook up with them. You just need to feel good. It needs to make you feel good at the end of the day. And so we've isolated men over here. We've isolated women over here. We're lying to both of them about what we know we truly want and what we were designed for as human beings, based on unconditional love that only God can give us. And now everyone's lonely and depressed and nobody's happy in relationships, and we look around and we wonder why.
This discrepancy in dating has even shown up, I think, in the conservative movement.
Oh, for sure.
Conservative girls, I feel like more than ever before, and I've been a conservative my whole life, but I've noticed it even at our Turning Point USA conferences and events and stuff, when I'm talking to the girls, everyone is on fire. Like, I want to get married. I want to have babies. I want to have a family first. I never ever hear, it's never a career first mentality from conservative young women right now that I'm hearing. But I am hearing that from all the conservative men.
Yep.
All the conservative young men are career obsessed. Oh, I need to make this amount of money before I can even think about getting engaged.
Yes,
and I'm
that's
like,
a good excuse.
And this I don't
hear a
understand.
lot.
The money lie, I think this is a lie from Satan to destroy relationships and put a detour in the process of young people on the way towards marriage, because all of these guys think I have to make a certain amount of money. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, what is the median household income for Americans? It's like, what is it even? Is it even $50,000?
No, I think it's around 40 actually.
Yeah. So it's absolutely.
Somebody fact check us in the control room for that, because I want to know. Yeah.
It's absolutely possible to get married making under $100,000 a year. Every guy I talk to, well, I have to make at least six figures.
I have to provide.
Yes. And I'm like, what are you talking about? First of all, part of marriage, and this is not obviously the most important or the only reason or purpose of marriage, but part of marriage is to come together and join everything. That includes your finances, to lift each other up and create that team. Your family is your home base, is your team. You guys work together to, be an advertisement. Basically, if Jesus' love for you, you use your marriage to show that to the world. And so part of that is combining your stuff. But I don't understand that excuse, and I get that a lot. And I think it's sad. It is the women right now that I feel like are like, okay, we're ditching this really evil, destructive mentality of I need to only have a career, family doesn't matter, getting married doesn't matter. But now the guys have picked up on that lie.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the grossness of pop culture, maybe it's not popular to say this, but I think some of the bad behavior that's encouraged by the left in pop culture, in music, it's definitely embraced by the conservative movement, and especially conservative men. I mean, I think it's pretty disgusting what a lot of them say on Twitter and like a cool, like woke-based tweet, and then what they're actually doing behind the scenes and the kind of things that they're sending to young women.
Preach.
And so I'm just saying, I've seen behind the curtain, and it's not pretty in that department. But in general, I don't know about you guys. I see the TikToks of what happens like with college, where it's guys like
Couch
lined
guy.
up out the it's like guys lined up out the front door of a frat house, and they're applauding the girl that's like leaving in the guy's t-shirt and
Yep.
getting picked up by her friend, and then it goes viral on TikTok and everybody jokes about it. And I see that girl and I'm like, honey, there's a better way. There's a better life for you. There's a better way. And so I'm happy that conservative women in our movement and our circle are embracing this. But there are so many women out there
The majority, I would
that
say.
are playing into this. And I feel sad. I read an article recently talking about how it's good to give yourself self-care after a hookup, and here are the ways you can do it. And it was like, take a warm bath, scrub your skin
'Cause
with
that's gonna
sugar
make
that
you
smells like
feel
vanilla.
better.
And it was all these physical things that you can do to your body to feel better and provide yourself self-care. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but when you get physical with a man, the science, you anti-science swines, tells you that you are
Freak.
going to release chemicals into your brain, into your body, that when they don't like you the next day, because guess what? They're probably not going to like you the next day just because you had sex with them. You're going to feel depressed, and
Yeah.
you're going to get drunk again the next night, the next weekend, and you're going to do the same thing with another person because now you want that fake sense of fulfillment, that fake sense of love. And I feel so bad.
Yeah, it's so
And so we
empty.
could talk about like this small amount of conservative women that still want this, but I'm thinking big picture. I feel horrible for the young women out there. And for young men, I hope that they do see it as you're building a legacy with someone. I hope everybody does this. Look up Winston and Clementine Churchill.
Ugh.
They are an iconic couple. They grew together. They worked decades to make Winston Churchill the prime minister. Once he was prime minister, they worked through World War II. It's just an amazing story, the kind of partnership they had. And I hope that my husband, I will not marry someone unless they have this mentality now. I will not just date anybody if they don't have that mentality on what it means to build a life together and be allies through something to achieve something with purpose and vision. I'm not interested.
I think we also are living in, it's a culture that it's trendy to be narcissistic. Everything is fulfill me first, fulfill me first. You know, in regards to sex, you get off first, not your partner. You pursue whatever interests you want. You go after it's everything is about me first. And I think, you know, we were made to serve someone else. You're not supposed to only serve yourself. We get fulfillment from that. And I think that also trickles down into dating culture is this selfishness. It's so pervasive.
Yeah, and you even see that in headlines of like Vogue magazine or Cosmopolitan magazine about how I'm in a relationship, but I wanted more, so I cheated on these 7 guys. Here's my story. Or just trying to fill this endless void. And it's mind-boggling to me that we have adopted such a me, I need to feel better about myself culture, especially in dating, rather than looking in the mirror and saying, I was designed for so much more than this. I need more than this. I think really at the end of the day, when you're all alone in your bedroom, and if you're living into this culture right now, you know that you were designed for more than this. You're heartbroken. It's really hard to deal with some of this. And I just hear horror stories from some of my friends right now in dating culture who eventually come around and they say, you know, like, yeah, I eventually do want to get married. And now I'm realizing I made all these mistakes and I wish that I could take all of them back. But they were so obsessed with this idea of filling this void and always feeling fulfilled and always feeling pursued and always feeling wanted that they ended up feeling the least beautiful and the least worthy and the least pursued they'd ever felt in their entire life. All of this is just a sham and a facade. And it breaks my heart that we have lied, not just to women, but also to men about who we are, what we deserve, and what we should be looking for out of romantic relationships, because we were designed for so much more than what we're living in right now.
In 2016, I kind of made a deal with myself and in promise to myself, I said, from now on, I'm not dating anyone that's not conservative. I had just tried. When I say I have dated every type of guy, I mean I have dated every type of guy, from the finance guy, the cowboy guy, you know,
the surfer guy,
the skinny guy, the fat guy. I have dated every type of freaking guy, and it always ends up the same. So, you know, I've done the date someone that's just like you, date your opposite. I've dated the liberal, whatever. So I finally said, okay, well, I know for sure I'm not compromising on somebody being a Christian and somebody being a conservative. So those were the 2 things that I stuck by. Now, that being said, one of my last serious relationships, I was so pissed off because as we're breaking up, he is somebody that also super involved in politics, wears the conservative movement on his sleeve, so passionate about everything with saving this country and all this. And I looked at him and tears are streaming down my face. And he's looking at me like he would rather be anywhere else than having this breakup conversation. And I go, you're doing everything that you can right now to save this country. The work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, everything we're doing is to save this country. Why are you so opposed to getting married and having a family to continue that legacy? What is the point of everything that I'm working for, everything that you're working for, if we're not having a family to continue that? How do conservative men rationalize this?
It's hard to overcome a multi-generational lie. It's really, really, really hard. Right now in America, divorce rates are exactly 50%. So even if you do, by some magic level, decide you're ready for marriage and you want to do that with somebody, you want to go the distance, you're ready to make that lifelong commitment, half of those people still decide, this wasn't for me. I mean, I think it's so easy to buy into this self-centered, self-fulfilled culture that wants to run away from sacrifice and service and unconditional love, that even if you do personally believe in all the same things, conservatism and a legacy and building something for the next generation and your Christian obligation to love people unconditionally, even that is almost impossible to connect the dots back to marriage and fulfilling relationships, because this is a lie that has pervaded our parents' generation, millennials, Gen Z. It probably will be a very big part, bigger than for us, for Generation Alpha, who's being born right now. And I don't know how we overcome that, to be honest with you.
I'm going to be 29 in February.
Mm-hmm.
How old are you, Morgan?
I'm 24.
And how old are you?
25.
24.
Okay,
We're
so
babies.
you guys are like the same age.
Yep.
All right, so what is your I'm nervous age? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm past it. When I was little, I literally thought when I was little, by 25, I would be married. So what is your I'm nervous age if you're not married yet? When are you starting to freak the heck out?
For me, I understand I can't force it. I don't know what, God has planned. I don't know what my life will look like. I've learned by now, like I've been through 2 serious relationships, and both of them, I was just shocked by the end of them. I had no intention that they would end in the way they did, but sometimes it ends.
Yeah.
And it really rocks your world sometimes. So that makes me vulnerable, and it makes me like nervous for it to happen again. It closes me off, but I am still so excited by the potential. Like even just the thought of it potentially working out one day and me having a partner gets me excited. I'm more so worried about just the chance that I don't meet someone and I'm out of my years of fertility. Like I would love to be a mother one day. And so that's my concern. But at the same time, I never imagined that life could be so rough, especially love. Like you see the stories in the movies, the rom-coms, someone gets left or someone's like in their mid-30s and they thought that they were going to get married and then the guy doesn't show up at the altar. Once I started entering the dating world and like I was with someone who was like secretly engaged, didn't tell me.
I'm sorry, what?
I just
what do you mean secretly engaged?
How do you
didn't
be
tell you?
secretly
Like, just
engaged to someone?
Literally, it was just same time in it. So that's like I have trust issues.
As you
but
should.
the problem is like I think of a girl like that. She was in her 30s and then finds out her fiance no longer wants to marry her. That's the kind of stuff of like that can happen in real life. You really never know. And I always used to say my fear is to be in my mid-30s. I'm about to lose my fertility, get out of that window, and then I'd lose my partner. Like maybe we've been together for a few years, we're about to get married, and then it happens.
Good
you just
God,
never
Morgan,
know.
it is spoopy season, but that's really scary stuff.
Well, that's the thing is like you have to brace for that and putting yourself out there to potentially achieve the greatness that is marriage and can be marriage.
Yeah.
It takes vulnerability, it takes intention, and it takes putting a little risk into it all. And so I'm still willing to do it, but it is a little scary.
Isabel, what is your I'm nervous age?
Had you asked me this like 5-6 months ago, I probably would have said by like 30, I'd be really, really nervous about that stuff. But I've had a really interesting perspective change in my life in the last couple of months. And I think about people in our parents' generation and how different dating was then. And I spent so much time this summer with my family. I spent a couple weeks in Colorado, which was super fun in between apartments. And I talked to my parents a lot about dating and marriage and how do you know when you know and, what does that look like?
I hate that freaking question and nobody answers it correctly. I say, how do you know when you know? They say, you just know.
You just
and I'm like, would
know.
you screw off? That is not helpful.
I really, truly believe that that's true. Which is mind-blowing. But I do. I believe that's true. And we were at my cousin's wedding, for example, in May. And they're so in love. I love my cousin's new wife. They're so phenomenal, like the best people. And the wedding was so beautiful. Everybody was sobbing their eyes out the whole time. And I remember in between the wedding ceremony and the reception, I asked my dad, when you were standing up there and when Matt was standing up there, my cousin, do you really just look at that person and you just know you're going to spend every day of the rest of your life loving that person with everything you've got? And my dad kind of looked at me and said, yeah. Not everybody, obviously, because half of marriage is ending in divorce right now, which is
that
sad
makes me excited.
Little asterisk on the side
excited.
of it. But I think it really, truly is when you know, you know. And so I don't know what that timing looks like, but look at my track record. I thought I knew a few times, and I thought I was doing all the right things, and I thought this was going to be it, and this was going to be my person or whatever. Clearly, by the end, I didn't know, and I had those gut feelings of this ain't it, fam. This is not what I was intended for. But my timing isn't working, so I have to trust God's timing, and he'll bring the right person into your life when he knows that that was the person he designed for you before you ever even came into this world, and that's mind-blowing and crazy, but I really, truly believe that it does work that way, that there is somebody out there designed for you, and it's all going to come into place when it is supposed to. So I don't know that I have like a specific age.
I love that.
How long have your parents been married, Isabel?
Almost 30 years. Long
Okay,
time.
my parents have been married for 31 years. What about you, Morgan?
26.
Mm-hmm.
See, and this is what's crazy. We're all coming from really
Also
great
rare.
families, long marriages, and yet here we are. That's not very, that's a downer, I know.
I think it's
well.
good.
I think we're
My
doing
parents
well.
didn't meet until they were 28 and 29.
Really?
Yeah, so I mean, it took a long time. It doesn't necessarily have to happen as soon as you graduate from college or right when you become an adult. It's different for everybody.
Now, Morgan, would you rather get married young and not fulfill your career goals or accomplish all of your career goals that you could ever have, but you do get married, but it has to be way later?
Oh, I just don't have career goals. The work I do is very fulfilling. My job is to promote the values of America and the values of family and love and the conservative movement. And so for me, I don't know what your guys' first job was. Mine was assistant media buyer in Boston, Massachusetts. And so I was scheduling commercials for grass seed companies and reality TV. And I was making like $40K in a super expensive city.
That's really good money for a first job. I think I made first real job $25K.
It was a struggle city though, in an expensive city like Boston with everything. So you're not making much at the end of the day. But I would see, first of all, the pregnant women at like my Boss Babe Culture office. They were literally staying at the office as long as they possibly could before they were about to freaking pop, just so that they had as many days as possible once the baby was born to be with the infant before they had to go back to work. And I saw that as a 22-year-old right out of college, and I said, well, that's gross, and I don't see that for myself. It was one of those moments in life where I was like,
nah,
well, that ain't for me. And I cannot possibly imagine doing that. So I know that I'm not in the right path. Yeah. And then I also saw the moms that were super stressed out, trying to rush to get to work early in the morning after rushing their kids to either daycare where they're paying the same amount as they're getting paid at work, or rush their kid to public school or wherever, but they're not spending those 8 hours with them and they're trusting someone else to raise the kid. And then they're rushing back after work to go pick up the kid, make them dinner, send them to bed, and then do the same thing every cycle. And I would hear their stories and I just knew it wasn't for me. And so from that early age, this is how I got into this work. I started to try and evaluate like what other opportunities are for there in this economy, in this country, for a young woman like me to do fulfilling work, have positive change, make money so that I'm financially independent and not, worried by the time I'm getting older. I have bills to pay before I meet my husband. I can't just like rely on my parents forever. It's not the 1800s. And so I need to be able to take care of myself, become self-reliant, and then eventually meet that person. And when you live the life that you love, you'll meet the person that you love. That's what I think. It'll lead you to that love. But that's what I saw for myself. And so I don't see it as, I have to accomplish my goals and then get married, or I have to get married and then not accomplish my goals. A lot of my goals kind of require another person and require someone, first of all, to procreate with. I can't have my homestead and like my 5 kids without somebody
what
to
do you
make
mean?
children
You need a
with.
man to do that also? What?
Unfortunately, yes.
Girl, you a strong, independent woman.
I look at my goals and I'm like, okay, so down payment, I need to get my baby goats, I need to do XYZ, and then I'm like, oh, I gotta get the boyfriend so that I can do all the other things. But I think there's so many career things that can still happen when you're married, and to tell people that life ends, excitement ends, fun ends when you're getting married and when you have kids, it's such it's such a cop-out, and
It's
it's
a
really
lie.
toxic, and it's really sad because there's so many fun opportunities that come with those things being added to your life. There's so many positive things, and I hope people see that. And again, it's one of those things. I'm so hard set in this concept now that if the guy that I'm seeing doesn't believe those things either, I'm not going to try and make him think that way. I'm just not going to be interested in starting something with him. I hope that he believes in those things.
I think, Isabel, you might be one of the most career ambitious women that I know, and yet you still hold family values really true to your heart, which I really love about you. And so I wonder what you would say with that. Get married young, but you don't accomplish all your career goals, or get married later, but you do accomplish all your career goals.
I reject the premise of the question, Alex, because they're not mutually exclusive. And I had a really interesting upbringing for our generation that was really rare at the time. I think now it would probably be a lot more common. But when I was in second grade, my mom got a really incredible job as the general counsel attorney for one of the largest mining companies in the world. And at the time, we lived in Colorado, which is where I grew up. And so we moved. We picked up our whole family and we moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is still my second home. I love it up there. It's absolutely beautiful. And we lasted about 9 months because it just wasn't home for us. The schools weren't what we were hoping for. The sun didn't come out in the winter, and we're sunshine people, which we got all the time in Colorado. And it just wasn't fitting right. So our whole family picked back up when we moved back to Colorado about 9 months later. But my mom kept her job in the other state. So we also tried it again when I was in 5th grade, lasted a year exactly that time in Idaho, and still went back to Colorado. But from my 2nd grade year all the way through my sophomore year of high school, my mom left and went to the airport every Sunday night and came back every Thursday night. So my mom was gone every single week when I was growing up. My dad had a year where he was at home and didn't work. We called him the Manny one year, and he was room mom and brought us to all of our ballet classes and had to learn how to do our ballet buns and take us to gymnastics. And we loved that experience with our dad. But my mom was really living proof for me growing up that A, you don't need permission from anyone, especially the government, to succeed and achieve all of your career goals. You can be the only woman in a room full of corporate career-driven men and hold your own and even kick their ass sometimes. So don't wait for permission to do that. But second of all, you can have a beautiful family and a beautiful marriage that there's not even a question of whether or not your marriage will survive, and also have a very fulfilling, successful career at exactly the same time. The two things are not mutually exclusive. So when we tell women today, it's one or the other. You got to be obsessed with your career and
Same
be
thing with
that
abortion.
girl boss, be that babe boss, but you can't have babies. You better abort that baby, or you can't have a husband because that's just going to weigh you down and you need to be in the office all the time. That is such a lie, because it's not even remotely true if you're with the person that you were intended to be with.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I said earlier that I have dated a liberal, not a leftist, but a
Spicy.
liberal. Morgan, have you? And would you?
No, I would never be able to, only because I am an intentional dater and I want to align, and not only align just with our core values, but like the way we see the world, the way we see leadership, especially in these days with our national government is getting insane. It's no longer federal. It's a national government telling us what to do, ignoring state and local powers. And I hope that my husband frickin' understands state power and local power, and I hope he's involved with the school board. I hope he's into these issues and protecting our kids, because with what the school systems are doing these days, I hope my husband understands the importance of homeschooling and would want me to be able to do those things. I hope if it was ever a situation of our kids being potentially forced to get a vaccination like we see these days from our government, I hope my husband would stand up against that too. What, am I going to get married to a guy and just love him even though he's a liberal, only to find out he would allow something like that to happen to our kids? Absolutely not. And so it's just those basics. I think we're definitely going to have to be two conservatives because we see the world the same way. I don't know how you could do the opposite.
So you definitely want to date a conservative.
Yeah.
And I'm in this place right now. Within conservatism, though, there are different types.
True.
You have your neocons. You have your
Yeah.
paleocons.
Yeah.
You've got the moderates. You've got the far right. So my question is, what is your ideal conservative man for each of you? Because here's what's interesting. So the guy that I'm dating now is a conservative, but he definitely is closer to, he's not a moderate, but I would say he falls more moderate than I do. I am way more far right than he is. But my main thing is, okay, I want to date somebody or marry somebody, I should say, who will be an activist with me, who will be, what is the football term? Is it offense or defense? I never know. Who's going to be fiercely protecting our kids and going to the school board meetings doing that. Is that offense or defense?
Well,
like when you're going
both,
on offense?
But okay.
I don't know. I don't know.
Protecting
Sports
is
with
defense
Alex
and then
Clark.
attacking is offense.
Yeah, okay. So I just want a guy basically that's going to be like a fierce protector with me and,
Yes.
and be proactive, I should say, in protecting our family and fighting for those values. So on the conservative scale, what kind of conservative do you want to date or marry?
For me, I don't like the conservative movement boys. I'm not interested in someone who sits behind a microphone and just kind of complains and says that we're all going to go to civil war, but like could never actually do it himself. And like maybe we'll go to the gun range.
What
You know, like maybe goes to the gun range one time, takes a picture and posts it on Instagram saying like, we must protect the Second Amendment. I can't do that. I'm more of like maybe a businessman that definitely understands the importance of economic independence and has conservative values, but is an influencer type. I definitely don't want that. A good way to describe my type would probably be like if the guy popped out of Duck Dynasty from the television.
Oh, boy. Full beard and everything?
Oh, like hairy and big and muscular. All the things.
Morgan.
It's a type, and it's not one of those conservative microphone boys.
No,
but that's my type, and I'm excited by that. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Isabel, what kind of conservative guy is your ideal guy?
Well, first I want to answer your previous question. I have dated a liberal. My summer camp high school boyfriend was a liberal, so I don't think it really mattered at the time whether or not we had the same life goals or anything. But I've always dated conservatives ever since because I think the worldview thing is very important and making sure you're walking in the same direction with your ambitions and goals and values. Ideal conservative man. I am dating him, I think. So
really?
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? Okay.
Sorry
No.
to burst everyone's bubble. No, he's wonderful. He's a lot more conservative than I am even, which is really surprising. I think I'm the opposite of your relationship where I would consider myself a little bit more moderate than him.
Really? In what way? Please explain this because I feel like you and I are very, very similar in our political views.
He grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, so I think
Okay.
that goes to tell you everything you need to know about that. But he's wonderful. And I think just most importantly, he really respects the idea of dating with intention, valuing myself and my respect as a woman and a child of God who was intentionally designed to be who I am today. So I don't think you always have to be into exactly the same stuff. I think as conservatives, we are so obsessed with like, we always have to have the same values. We always have to be exactly on the same page about everything. Having the same values and being on the same page with that stuff doesn't necessarily mean you have the same hobbies or the same favorite activities to do every day. But what I love the most about my boyfriend is that we might have different hobbies or interests at the end of the day, but we love spending time with each other. And so it doesn't even matter. Like you want to do the thing that the other person is doing all the time. And he's very adventurous and always loves to try new things and just very, very intentional. I think that's the best word that I can use to describe him. He's awesome.
What are your thoughts on living together before marriage? If you have done it before, would you do it again?
All right,
Isabel.
we're getting spicy, people. I've done it. Don't recommend it for several reasons. I think, honestly, my last relationship that ended earlier this year, that actually hurt our relationship quite a bit.
Living together.
Quite a bit, living
Why?
together. So we had been dating for like 2 years at the time, and I had been living in Washington, D.C., while he was living all the way across on the other side of the country. And the plan was when I finished my graduate school program in D.C., I would move here and move in with him. And like I said up front, I want to be engaged within the year if we move in together because that's really important to me. I don't want to live with somebody before that is really, really serious in our relationship, that we know that is where this is going. And ultimately, because I mentioned earlier, all those life circumstances changed and outside circumstances changed. We moved in together at all the wrong times. And there was all these other things going on emotionally that were already really putting a strain on the relationship. And then moving in together and all of a sudden sharing, you know, silverware and sharing a bathroom and like all of those things, you don't realize how much that adds on to the challenge of a relationship. It seems so silly, especially because in modern dating culture, you're always at each other's apartment or each other's house all the time. It makes sense to move in together because that's where you're spending all your time with them anyway. But literally sharing an address and sharing a bathroom and sharing a garage and sharing a kitchen, that is a whole new level of being with somebody all the time that I don't think you're really ready to wrap your head around until you know that you've committed yourself entirely to that person for the rest of your life.
I feel the same way, and this is exactly why I have never lived with somebody that I was dating before. Obviously I've never been married, so before getting married, and I never will, is because I feel like the act of combining everything and living together naturally adds so much pressure to your relationship. And so knowing that you actually have made that commitment before God and actually being married, I feel like people are more likely to be willing to work it out. Whereas if you're just dating and ish hits the fan, you're going to be like, well, we're not even married.
Of course.
Yes. So you're going to say, well, we're not even married, so it's just way easier for me to peace out. Then you're like stuck in a lease mess and all this. So Morgan, how do you feel about it?
So I was in a unique situation. Back to that idea of like, maybe the relationship's not perfect, the circumstances, the factors, maybe they're not perfect, but why would I be ungrateful for what I'm being presented with? That's where I always find myself, and I'm trying to always better myself on that mentality. In the most recent relationship I was in, I was moving to a new city, and he lived there, and it started out as just a very casual thing, but so early on it was, I love you, we are it for each other, you're it for me. It was that kind of like validating talk. And also one of the couples that we're friends with, they had this amazing story of like second date they move into it together, and then they have been married with kids for like a very long time.
I always hear this stuff, and
so you hear
like,
those stories,
woo!
And that's the story that I was told of like, look, we're doing it, and so I was like, I mean, if it's happened before, it could happen again. Here we go. So I was nervous, but I was also like, wow, like life is crazy, and like just go with it. If this guy loves me so much and is committed, all that stuff. But what happened is like his house went under construction, and he was like, good news. Let's do it. And so he ended up moving into the apartment very early on in the relationship. But after all those things were validating and were said, the problem that I have, I think what Isabel said is a good point too. The only problem that I have with it is you're combining lives. And I'm a very laid back person. Like I could really live with anyone. I'm a clean person. I do everything. I made us meals every morning, coffee, breakfast every morning. We went about our day. We came back together at the end of the night. And it was just such a lovely routine. Like I loved having a best friend in that aspect of like we did life and then we came back together at the end and we said have a nice day in the morning. It was really great. And I'm fine with that. It's just a matter of, okay, well, now you've combined lives with that person, and what happens to you when they don't want to do that anymore? And so it's like the ripping apart. And first of all, you're told, well, why do we need to get married or engaged or anything?
It's all the benefits.
This is literally our lives. What's wrong with this? So I was then stuck in that situation because I'm full on like straight up wifey. I was being called wifey all this time. I actually asked to stop being called wifey because it made me uncomfortable at a certain point of being told like, I'm never going to get to be wife, but I'm wifey and we are in this apartment. So it gets you in a pickle. And so for me, I've just personally decided not necessarily like the living thing. I think it's on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah,
I think I'm just very apprehensive to do it, but also more so apprehensive to fully join lives in very serious ways before there's legitimate commitment to saying like, I want to do this with you. So that's what I'm more the mentality of it. And I'm not going to say I'm never going to do this, I'm never going to do that. But it was a big lesson for me to have to then rip my life apart and redo the whole thing, and to go from living with someone for almost a year to now no longer. And for me, it ended with me being in a house alone, and that really, really hurts. Like that really freaking sucks. And so that's I didn't like that situation at all, and maybe it's a defensive thing for me to say, but I probably would avoid that. And it's not that I'm like, oh, I don't want to have to live with a boy. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with cleaning and everything, but it's just more of a protective thing for myself at this point.
Isabel, how long is too long to date someone and not say those three little words?
Oh, they say that?
So
not
how long,
to ask to marry you, but to say I love you.
Yes, to say I love you. So how long is you've been dating this long and it still hasn't been said? When is it a red flag?
I mean, absolute, like this is not it. A year probably, but I would start being really worried about that 6 to 7 months in. Like if you're especially if you're like in the same city, it's not long distance, you're seeing each other every single day, you know everything about that person. If you haven't said to that person I love you, you've probably seen every single aspect of their life You know them
My
as well
best
as you're going to
friend-
know them.
My best friend dated her now husband for a couple, I don't remember how long until they got engaged, a year and a half or something. But they did not say I love you until he was proposing.
What?
And it did
No.
not freak her out. And I was going,
No.
oh my gosh, Lauren, this is crazy.
That was Lauren?
Yes.
Lauren, we got to talk.
I was telling Lauren, I'm like,
You're
how
great,
he hasn't
though.
said I
Yeah.
love you. How is this not freaking you out? She's like, he told me that he will not say it until he knows that he's met the woman that he's going to marry. So I know.
Yeah, but I
that
feel
if-
like you know that you're going to marry them before you get down on one knee.
Well, he did know that, but he didn't want to say those words until he actually was on one knee. And so that's what he did. And I was like,
Wow.
I couldn't do it. I'm just not a patient person.
I'm also a words of affirmation person, though.
Yeah.
So, like, I like hearing why you love me and why you like me. I think that's important. I think speaking with intention, all of this is about intention today, is so missing in society today. Everything's so instant or digital or fake or very hyperbolic. Like, I love you so much, even with friendships and stuff. We have lost the meaning of those words. And so I think if you're told it with intention and explained why that person loves you, that is so powerful and that's so important in a relationship.
I always say, tell me something nice.
Yeah, I know.
That's what I say. I go, tell me something nice. And
Yeah.
then my boyfriend will say, you're so smart. I'm so proud of you. I love the latest Spillover episode. Like he'll go through and he'll say this. I always say, tell me something nice. So how long would you date a guy until you're like, this is getting weird because we've been dating this long and he still hasn't said I love you, or I haven't said I love you? And also, does the guy need to say it first?
I honestly, I don't know. I'm not one to give good dating advice. I mean, you guys are the ones in the relationships and stuff. Mine, the last relationship, it was like a couple weeks in, and he's like, "I love you. You are it for me," and that freaked me out. I called my mom right away. I was like, "Mom," and I didn't say it back at first, but then I did because I was like, "Just go with it. Why am I overthinking it?" That being said, I'll go on like. You guys are, I'm jealous. You guys are in like your dating mode. I'm on like, I go on first dates and I just stare at the guys like this across the table. Because I am
She's
like,
giving the stink eye for those of you who are only listening and not watching on
Yeah, I
Politics
love
YouTube.
that.
I'm bitter and not that I'm like bitter about love and stuff. I know it can happen, but for the most part, if I don't have this spark, then I'm just not interested. And
Yeah,
what
as you
happens for
shouldn't
me, guys really see my Instagram, and Alex, you've said this. You're like the epitome, or what'd you say? That I'm like the American woman, classic American woman or something. Guys see my Instagram and call me like wifey material all the time. I'll go on first dates all the time. Not really anymore because I was kind of like in a phase where I was trying to put myself out there, and then I was like, no, I don't like this. But they will tell me across the table, like, I think we're going to get married. You're my future wife. Like, I could easily fall in love with you. This really weird stuff. And it's like, you don't know me. And I've been told 2 times in a row now by both guys that I'm their future wife. I'm Mrs. Fill in the blank. And I'm sick of hearing that. I want someone that's going to take their time and like want to get to know me.
Yeah.
And then whatever timeline that looks like, I just feel like it's on a case-by-case basis. But I just don't want to be told that right from the start that somebody loves me
Yeah.
or sees me as their future wifey. Any of that language, to me, it shows that a guy doesn't take that stuff seriously and is not intentional. He's glamorizing it, romanticizing it.
Last question. Isabel, how do you pick up the pieces when you're dating for marriage, but it doesn't work out?
It's tough. And the world the three of us live in, especially online, is a highlight reel. And I think we forget that sometimes, that we live real lives and have real emotions, and people forget that about us, that like it's not just a cute picture that we posted on Instagram, or it's not just your daily video that you post for Turning Point USA or your appearance on TPUSA Live. Like, you're a real human being, and it's hard. It's really hard going through a breakup, especially when you thought it was going to end in marriage and it didn't. So I say this about more than just dating, but in the context of this conversation, it's okay to feel that. And I'm a big believer that in order to move through things, you have to feel them first. You can't avoid them. You can't push them down. You can't pretend that those feelings aren't there. You have to acknowledge them and sit with them for a minute, and then you can move forward and figure out what that means for you. So don't gloss over that. Don't say the next day, okay, I'm fine now. I guess I'll just go find a new person. There's such a rush to do that, I think, especially in our very instant society of instant gratification, where you open your phone and immediately it's a perfectly edited, beautiful, colorized highlight reel of everybody's life. That's what you think your life is supposed to be like. But you are going to go through trials and tribulations, and dating is hard. Nobody likes to talk about how hard dating is, but
I
it
freaking
sucks.
hate dating.
It sucks sometimes. And
Talking phases.
it's
What the heck
horrible.
are those?
Friend zones. I mean, like, you're it, you're not it, the lies. I mean, it sucks. There's the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows in dating, but that's what makes it beautiful. And love is the best thing that we do in humanity, in my opinion. So enjoy the highest of the highs, live for those moments, but also be okay sitting in the lowest of the low moments, knowing I was designed for more than this, and use that as a symbol in your life to know what you should be looking for and what you know you need to avoid in your next relationship. So I think it comes with boiling everything down to who I am. What is my identity? I am a child of God. I was intended for purpose. I was designed to be exactly who I am, and I shouldn't have to apologize for anything that I'm interested in or that I'm passionate about or that I love. The right person for me, even if they're not a carbon copy of me, is going to love all of those things too, and they're going to love that about me because they were designed for me.
Morgan, how do you pick up the pieces when you're dating for marriage but it doesn't work out?
I think it's okay to be sad for a little bit. I mean, for me, I'll be honest, I drink a lot of wine. I don't drink. I'm a very disciplined person. I drink a lot of wine every night to just fall asleep. And I will admit that. You don't have to feel like shame in that. It wasn't this thing of like, oh, I wish we're still together. It was more so like mourning the loss of a best friend. I mean, I spent every night with that person, and then all of a sudden it's just not the case anymore. And it's like, I'm fine. So I just felt this deep sadness, and I still feel a sadness for some reason. I'm not sad, but I just feel that, and I just kind of avoid thinking about it for the most part because it's like, that was such a strange phase of life. But overall, because him and I had gone back and forth so much about what we wanted in life, it just more so in my heart rooted what I want into my own mind. Like I was like, okay, I know what I want in life. This is not it. I'm still going to be sad when this is all happening and over. But I see the positive stories out there and I get excited. I see Ballerina Farm and I get excited.
Dude, I love Ballerina Farm.
I hope if I look at Ballerina Farm and I'm like, it is possible. Like I'm going to look out of my kitchen window one day at the mountains of the West or something like that. And I'm going to see my little kids. The boys are going to be on horses because they're going to go handle the animals and stuff. And the girls are maybe with me in the kitchen. But I just imagine that stuff and I feel hopeful. And if that doesn't happen, then God doesn't want it to happen for me. But every night I'm like, Jesus, please. I know that it's your decision, but come on. I'm going to like sneak a little tip up there and get something special.
Yeah.
But it's just that stuff. Stay positive and you learn and you become a better person from it. And it's rough, but life isn't perfect. It's about riding the ups and downs and becoming more resilient through the hard times.
I think it's important to end all of this on a happy note because we talked a lot about sad things,
sorry.
and I'm the optimist girl over here. Call me crazy, but it's not forever. Also, the heartbreak and the mourning of a loss of your best friend and the person that you were dating, who you thought you were going to spend forever with, it's not forever. And even in just a couple of weeks or a couple of months, you're going to meet somebody or you're going to come to terms with where you are in life that gives you a whole new outlook and perspective on life. And you'll feel so much hope and gratitude and joy. I mean, I remember just a couple months ago, we were in New York City, you and me, Alex, in March, while Alex was going through some personal stuff with dating. And I remember at the time, both of us were in just a really negative place in our dating life.
And your mom showed up.
My mom was there.
Your mom came to New York City, and me and you were both like,
we're like,
Mrs. Brown, give us some hope.
Both drinking glasses of wine, asking my mom for motherly advice in the middle of New York in the pandemic. What a time to be alive. But I remember both of us, before my mom got there for that trip, asking each other, do you think it gets better? Like we really, for a moment there, wondered, is it ever going to get any better than this? Yep. And I look back now, 6 to 9 months later, as we're having this conversation, and I don't even recognize those two girls that were sitting there in New York. Like, we're just in such different places now, and we're both feeling really fulfilled in our relationships, and we're really happy. And I think that there's so much to be said about what's right around the corner. So don't lose hope.
Isabel, where can people find you on Instagram?
At the Isabel Brown.
Morgan, where can people find you?
Morgan.Zegers.
Thank you guys for coming on the Spillover.
Thanks
for having us.
What kind of cute conservative dater are you? Are you an Isabel, a Morgan, an Alex? Even if you're already married, you definitely related more to one of us, I'm sure. So this was such a fun episode. But also, the subject is really hard for me to talk about. It never used to be. I'm sure it has to do with the fact that I'm turning 29 in February and I'm everywhere I want to be professionally, but not personally. But what's funny is it isn't for a lack of trying, right? We kind of talked about that today. And what can I say? You know, if I had to get married and be a mom right now, I would. At the same time, I also know I'm living out something that I prayed about. I have my dream job. So I have some things that I've prayed for and some things I don't. And I think I'm in a very awkward purgatory where I want to be direct and let guys that I'm dating know what I want. But I also don't want to scare them away or pressure them too much. You know, you don't want to force someone to want to be with you. You want it to be their idea. But you also get into your late 20s and your early 30s and you start feeling that pressure yourself. And I've never been a patient person, ever. It's one of my biggest character flaws. I also like to plan and know everything that's happening or going to happen in advance. So if you're like me and you're in a season of waiting and you don't want to be, I feel you. If you're like me and you're constantly asking God, is it ever going to happen for me? I see you. I am you. Let me know what you thought about this Girl Talk episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to The Spillover if you're not already. Please leave your weekly 5-star review every week after you watch the episode. Just make it a habit. Leave that 5-star review. My daily show, Politics, on Instagram. Follow us there. That's where I cover pop culture without the leftist propaganda every single day. And if you really like these personal discussions and life advice and stuff, you will really like the Cute Conservatives Facebook group. There's over 8,400 women in there, I believe, conservative young women, just like you and I, meeting up, making friends, and having conversations, just like this one that I had today, all the time. So can't wait to talk again next Friday. Love you, mean it. Bye. Big dog status, I'm a big dog, I pull up on the